Hello, my name is Kanji Sahara, and I have the pleasure of being the narrator of this video. Because of the COVID 19 pandemic, all the World War II camp pilgrimages have been canceled this year. Instead, we are having virtual pilgrimages. At the beginning of the last century, the Japanese community in America faced two big social problems: the big picture bride problem and the orphan problem. The Issei solved the latter problem by building orphanages, two in Los Angeles and one in San Francisco. The first part of this video describes what the Isseis created: three orphanages completely different from each other. Then we have World War II, the evacuation, and what to do about the orphans. The solution was Manzanar's Children's Village. Our video has oral interviews by two of the orphans who describe life in the Children's Village. Finally, we have the names of the orphans of the Manzanar's Children's Village. This video is dedicated to these orphans. There were many orphans or half-orphans in the Japanese community. Often the mother passed away and the father could not take care of the children by himself and placed them in shonyen. Some fathers would come to the shonyen every Sunday to see his children. These children are called half-orphans. In a conventional society, these children would be taken care of by the grandmother. But in the Japanese community in America, the grandmother was back in Japan. And many public orphanages will not accept Japanese children, thus the need for Japanese orphanages. In Los Angeles, the Shonyen was created by a group of Issei. In San Francisco, the Japanese division of the Salvation Army created an orphanage. The Marino Catholic Church also created an orphanage in Boyle Heights. Most of the orphans and staffs of the Manzanar's Children's Village came from these three orphanages. We will briefly describe these three orphanages and their founders. Rokuichi Kusumoto was the founder of Shonyen. In 1908, Kusumoto came to Seattle and worked as a houseboy and acquired the name Joy. In 1910, Joy founded Jindokai, the Seattle Humane Society. They worked on the picture bride problem. After coming to America, many picture brides were greatly disappointed with their husband and also with the poor economic and social conditions. Many could not return to Japan, and thus we had the picture bride problem. In 1912, Joy moved to Los Angeles and started Rafu, Jindokai, to work on the picture bride problem in Los Angeles. They encouraged Japanese immigrants to assimilate to American society. He wrote an article in the Japanese YWCA publication for the need to educate picture brides before they set sail to America. Then Joyce also started working on the orphan problem in Los Angeles, and that is how Shonyen got started. When Shonyen had only a few orphans, the facilities were former homes. In 1920, Shonyen built their Silver Lake campus. Because the handwritten notation might be difficult to read, let me read them for you. In the front left is the sick room with 6 to 8 beds, then the superintendent's quarters, next the office, the living room, and the girls' bedroom with 10 to 12 beds. Behind is the baby's room, then behind is another baby's room, and then the boys' room. In the back is the dining room, kitchen, another room, and then the laundry. These facilities were duplicated at the Children's Village at Manzanar. Many claim that Shonyen was the best community organization that the Issei ever created. This photo was taken at the main entrance to the Shonyen campus in Silver Lake. In this photo, Joy Kusumoto is standing in the center of the back row. To his left is Harry Matsumoto, and to his right is Lillian Ida. In the back row, second from right, is Joy Kusumoto's adopted daughter, Yasuko. Yasuko lived a very eventful life. In 1939, Yasuko went alone to Shanghai, China, to start an orphanage. At that time, there was a war going on between China and Japan. Many Chinese were being killed, so there were many orphans. The Chinese were initially suspicious of a Japanese starting an orphanage in their country in the middle of the war. After a while, they decided that Yasuko was legitimate. The Shonian orphans looked well-dressed and alert. When the orphans at Shonian became 16 years old or so, they would be sent out to work as houseboys or housegirls. They would essentially become live-in servants. This was also the practice of mainstream orphanages. It appears that orphanages did not prepare the orphans for college. Many college students required the financial support of their parents. Orphanages believed their task was to raise the orphans up to the age of 16 or so, and then the orphans had to fend for themselves. The Salvation Army was a Christian church organized along military lines with a general in London and other officers. Masasuke Kobayashi came to America in 1902, went to college, and became a Presbyterian. In 1915, Kobayashi returned to Japan. While there, he meets the Salvation Army and joins them. People claim that Kobayashi liked the Salvation Army because it was organized along military lines and Kobayashi came from a samurai family. The Japanese division of the Salvation Army was in Japantown in San Francisco. The building was completed in 1937. Also in Japantown were the Japanese YMCA building and the Japanese YWCA building. Salvation Army provided English courses, Americanization classes, maternity hospital, home for aged, orphanage, shelter for, quote, helpless Japanese girls. This is the dining room of the Japanese division headquarters. Cooks and other workers are standing to the left. Salvation Army officers are standing in front of the arch windows. In their oral interviews, many orphans from the Salvation Army complained that they were not given spending money so that they could buy candy and other knickknacks. 100 years ago, tuberculosis or TB was a feared and common sickness. When World War II started, there were 500 Japanese tubercular patients in LA County. The 150 or so too ill with TB were exempt from camp. They were sent to the Hillcrest Sanitarium in La Crescenta or the Marino Sanitarium in Monrovia. Though these people were not in camp, they were under the jurisdiction of the WRA. The Japanese also wanted orphans to be exempt from camp. To this, the Army replied, quote, the great states of California, Oregon, and Washington needed to be protected also from orphans of Japanese American heritage who were in various orphan asylums. In 1920, plans were made for a grade school in Little Tokyo and a sister's home in Boyle Heights. A two-story concrete school was built on Hewitt Street and 200 children enrolled in 1922. Father Hugh Lavery came to Marino in 1927 and was a leader of Marino for 30 years. In 1966, Father Lavery received an award called, quote, Order of Sacred Treasure from Emperor Hirohito. The Marino Sisters' Home in Boyle Heights is where Marino Catholic Church had a convent for the nuns and a home for orphans. It was located on Boyle Avenue, 1 block south of the present-day Cairo Retirement Home. In the front was a modest two-story mansion. In the back, there was a 3-story building that had a dining room and play area on the first floor, a convent for the nuns on the second floor, and a chapel on the third floor. There were 50 children at the sisters' home. After the war, the Marino orphanage could not reopen because of new state laws. To avoid camp, Marino sent 33 orphans to foster homes outside the West Coast evacuation zone. Eventually, 7 orphans were sent to Manzanar. Because the Marino sisters, Susanna and Bernadette, were Japanese, they lived in Manzanar. The Marino father, Steinbach, and brother Walsh were non-Japanese, so they lived outside the camp in Bishop. Father Lavery stationed priests, brothers, or sisters in all the camps. People said that Father Lavery had a, quote, 10,000 miles parish. Lillian Ida entered UC Berkeley at age 16. She was initially barred from the School of Social Welfare because of being Japanese, but she protested and became the only Japanese in the department. Lillian Ida became an accredited social worker but could not find a job because she was Japanese. The California State Welfare Department required Shonyen to have a social worker, so Lillian and Shonyen were a perfect match. In 1939, Joy Kusumoto was going to Japan for a year, so they appointed Lillian to be the superintendent of Shonyen. Joy Kusumoto came back in 1940. On Pearl Harbor Day, Joy was arrested by the FBI and sent to Missoula, Montana internment camp. Harry Matsumoto worked at Shonyen while going to UCLA. He was a member of the Shonyen Nisei board. When the government decided to make Children's Village at Manzanar, the California Welfare Department recommended the Matsumotos as its superintendents. T.G. Ishimaru was an optometrist in Little Tokyo. He was the chairman of the Nisei Shonyen board. After Joy Kusumoto was arrested by the FBI on December 7, T.G. Ishimaru became the leader of Shonyen. T.G. Ishimaru was incarcerated in Poston. On April 28, 1942, the Matsumotos and T.G. Ishimaru drove up to Manzanar to see the camp as it was being built. The government's original plan was to divide up the orphans into small groups with a caretaker and place them in the regular blocks. However, the caretakers wanted to live in the regular blocks with their own family and come to work at Children's Village. The Shonyen people convinced the government to keep the orphans together in one Children's Village. There were two reasons why the Children's Village was placed in Manzanar. The first was that Manzanar was closest to the three pre-war Japanese orphanages. The second was that Manzanar was the furthest along in its construction. Recall that the other 9 camps were completed in the fall of 1942, so the Japanese had to first go to the assembly centers and then to one of the concentration camps. T.G. Ishimaru did not want the orphans to first go to an assembly center and then to a concentration camp. The construction of Manzanar began in March of 1942, and major construction completed within 6 weeks. On March 21, the first 82 Japanese Americans made the 220-mile trip by bus from Los Angeles. By mid-April, up to 1,000 Japanese Americans were arriving daily, and by July, Manzanar's population was nearly 10,000. On June 23, 1942, Shonyen staff members and the first group of orphans boarded 2 military buses heading towards Manzanar. One bus was for the boy orphans and the other bus was for the girl orphans. This map shows what was being constructed at Manzanar. This is a map of a typical block at Manzanar. There were 36 such blocks in the camp. Each block had about 300 people, giving a total population of 10,000 people at Manzanar. There were 14 barracks per block. In the center of the block was a women's latrine and a men's latrine. The barracks did not have running water. In the corner was a mess hall where you ate your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For the Children's Village, Lillian wanted 3 barracks, and each barrack larger than the barracks for the regular blocks. She wanted a restroom in each barrack. One of the barracks would have a kitchen and dining room. Lillian wanted the Children's Village to be close to the hospital and also not in the corner of the camp. This is a map of Manzanar. The dark horizontal line on the bottom represents Highway 395. If you go to the right for 60 miles, which is to the north, you get to Bishop. If you go left for 220 miles, which is to the south, you get to Los Angeles. On the top, near the center, is the cemetery with the famous obelisk monument known as the Soul Consoling Tower. This is where the yearly Manzanar pilgrimage takes place. In the top right quadrant is the Children's Village, represented by 3 barracks. On the top right corner is the hospital. Note the elementary school in Block 16. The daily routine at the Children's Village was similar to that at Shonyen. They woke up early for breakfast, a Christian service, and school. After school, boys and girls studied and did their homework, took classes in arts and crafts, and participated in organized recreation. Dinner was served at 5 p.m. Children and staff ate together in the Children's Village dining hall. At the dinner, before sitting down, The children stood at their place and sang a song, quote, God is great and God is good, and we thank you for this food. Amen. The younger children went to bed at 7:30, and the rest of the children's village had a curfew of 9 p.m. The orphans went to the same elementary school as the other children of Manzanar. After school, they would return to the children's village. Because the orphanage facility was self-sufficient, there was little need to leave the children's village. The orphans ate every meal inside the children's village with their caretakers, separate from other camp children who ate their meals at their block mess halls. Finally, the orphans were ostracized by some children who had been told by their parents not to play with the orphans. Some parents even told their children, quote, if you don't behave, I will send you to the children's village. Harry Matsumoto was the superintendent and Lillian was the assistant superintendent of children's village. In 1943, Mary and Lillian Matsumoto visited Joy Kusumoto at the Santa Fe internment camp and told him that they got married, and they bade him farewell. Joy Kusumoto took the second hostage exchange trip and returned to Japan. While in Japan, Joy visited his daughter at her orphanage in China. Joy Kusumoto died in February of 1945 at age 72. Most of the children were from the 3 California Japanese orphanages and foster homes, but there were also children from Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. There were 101 orphans at Manzanar's Children's Village, but there seems to be more than 200 other Japanese orphans who were not in Manzanar's Children's Village. At the time of admission, 29% of the children were under the age of 4 and 50% were under the age of 7. About 19% of the children were of mixed race. Several Japanese children living with whites or Latino foster families were sent to Manzanar. The Army got the children's name by combing through federal welfare records. Manzanar Camp Director Ralph Merritt was very proud of Children's Village. When an important visitor came to Manzanar, he would take them to see Children's Village. The pinafore dress that the girls are wearing were sewed by the Children's Village staff. In 1944, Easter was on April 9, and it is bright and sunny at Manzanar, but snow is still up in the mountains. This is a home movie taken by the Manzanar Camp Director, Ralph Merritt. In their oral histories, the former orphans talk about the big grass field, the gazebo, and the wooden fence. In 1944, people started talking about closing the camps and what to do about the orphans at Children's Village. Eva Robbins became the new superintendent of Children's Village. Eva's job was to find the parents or relatives or adoptive homes or foster homes for the orphans. After the war, Shonyan became the home for Japanese returning to LA. After 10 years as a home for the returning Japanese, the Nisei attempted to restart Shonyan as an orphanage. John Iso, the World War II head of the MIS Japanese Language School, raised $45,000 for the new Shonyan. But the philosophy of welfare agencies in the state of California had changed. Now they recommended placing orphans with foster homes instead of with orphanages. Also, the Niseis were having the children, and the Issei grandmothers were happy to care for them. Harry and Lillian Matsumoto first relocated to Salt Lake City in September of 1944 and then returned to the Bay Area. Lillian was a librarian for UC Berkeley for 19 years. Lillian Matsumoto died in 2014 at age 101. Because many orphans came to Manzanar together and had known each other and their staff guardians for years, the closure of Children's Village at the end of the war was especially painful. There were supposed to be 101 orphans and children's villages. In the table for the disposition of the children, we have found only 91 cases. In the end of the video, where we list the orphans of Children's Village, we have found only 88 names. Dennis Tojo's mother was a Japanese and his father was a Caucasian. His mother placed Dennis in the Children's Home Society, which was like an adoption agency. The Children's Home Society placed Dennis in several foster homes. One foster home was a Japanese family in Orange County. Dennis looked white and thought that he was white. When he went to Shonyan and then to Manzanar, he realized that he was different from the other children. When Dennis was living in Manzanar, he was teased and picked on by the other children because of his name Tojo and because he was not 100% Japanese. When Dennis was adopted by the Bauer family and lived in Bishop, he was teased because he was not 100% white. We will present an oral interview of Dennis Tojo Bauer and then an oral interview of Celeste Lloyd Theodore.
You were there. How many people were there who were orphans like yourself?
Oh, I'm going to guess about 60. They ranged from very small children to high school age. And as I recall, when they reached the age of 18, which is considered to be a young adult, they would disappear from the camp, go live somewhere else, because they had reached that age in which the government had no more, or the orphanage had no more responsibility for them.
What kind of a place did you stay in when you first got there?
Oh, our barracks were ready for us. We had nice facilities. I think they were a little better built than the regular barracks because they were built for the orphanage. And as I recall, there were large dormitories, and I can only speak for the boys, but we had, where I was like for, I'm going to say kindergarten through 5th grade, and then the other wing was like maybe 6th through high school, but we were split, and the little kids were on one side and the big kids were on the other side. And in between it was the counselors' quarters. And we were very fortunate in that we had a wonderful counselor by the name of John Nagayama who guided us and gave us assistance as we needed it in our growing up.
What about what kind of food did they give you? Did you eat with the regular folks? Or?
No, we had a mess hall. That was kind of funny. We were told that, we weren't told, we could have as much rice and brown gravy as we wanted. And that became our major staple. We were also told that because there was a meat shortage, that sometimes we were eating meat that was horse meat. I don't know whether that was somebody's imagination, but I recall being told that some of our gravy was made from horse meat.
Never know, mystery meat. Was the rice and gravy because they thought that was what Japanese people ate, or what?
I think it was probably more convenient. How would I know? I'm 7 years old, 6 years old, but you could always get more rice and gravy.
What did your daily life routine come to be once you got settled in there?
One of the things that's kind of blocked out in my mind, and I don't know why, is I don't remember very well my school days. I remember a little bit about them in that we had a class, we went to school, and we had tables and straight back, no straight backs, just stools, benches that we sat on behind the table and did our schoolwork. So for some reason, and I don't know why, I don't have a lot of memories about that. Our typical day was, as I remember it, was getting up. We each had the responsibility to make our bed. We each had the responsibility to brush our teeth, wash our faces. We would go to the mess hall where we would have our meals, and then we would return to just be kids. That's the best way I can explain it. Because remember, we're on the little side. Now on the big side, I recall those people had more responsibilities than we had. And I'm sure that we tried to get out of some of those duties whenever we could.
Now, where did that rebelliousness begin?
Oh, I think it began when in Manzanar, when they used to make us eat everything off our plate, and I wouldn't do it. And if I didn't like food, they make us sit there till midnight at the dining hall. And then at midnight, they let us go. Oh, they told me it was midnight. I had no idea. But I know it was a long time because there were several of us that wouldn't eat what we didn't like.
And what were some of those foods you didn't like?
Well, the one particular one is that shaved daikon. You know what that is? Oh, horrible. I get the creeps. And all my friends, they said, "Oh, we love it, Celeste." Yeah. I said, "Well, you take it whenever it comes. It's a garnishment that comes with sashimi." And I said, "You can have it, but I won't touch it." And that was the only thing I didn't like.
And so you just kind of waited them out?
I just waited until they told us we could leave. But I won the battle. They did not.
Important.
That's why they said that I fight. You said in the paper that they said I was a fighter. Well, I was.
Questioned authority.
Uh-huh.
So, other than Ruth, do you have any recollections at all of Lillian or Harry Masumoto at the Shonin?
Not at all. I know that they were in charge of the physical end of it. You know, making the dormitories functionable, making them sensible. That we had indoor plumbing, and we didn't have to go a block to go to the bathroom or anything like that. And I think our mess hall was within the confines of the village. That's all I remember. And they had beautiful lawn. I remember that, and pear tree, because we used to pick the pears and wrap them up in newspaper because they said that's the way that they ripen. And I didn't know that, but we wrapped them up in newspaper and got to eat them when they were ripe. Yeah, and I just remember a lot of good times there. Well, I remember the SWAT line, too. The SWAT line is when your peers did this. You'd have to go to the SWAT line. They hit you if you misbehaved. You know, the line, I guess they gave a list. So, okay, the following are to go through the SWAT line and list your name. You had to go SWAT line while your peers whacked you on the behind.
So you got swatted a few times?
Oh, yeah.
And so what would you get swatted for?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know what I did wrong. What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong.
So would these be kids your age or older kids? Or
A little older. But boy, when it was their turn, I was able to swat them too. Because after all, I was from 6 to 8 in camp. And
so that's how discipline was enforced in the children's village.
yeah, that's what you know. But I wasn't in the SWAT line too often. I would escape it. But what I liked about the Children's Village was the freedom. Now, I'm finding some stories where they said that you couldn't leave the confines of the village, but I don't find that true because I used to wander all over that camp. They told me later it was 1 square mile. I said, but I'm 7 and 8 years old. You're older. You can do. People, they don't give 7 and 8 and 9 years old kids any credit for having any brains. So, so I used to walk all over that place and visit. I used to visit my girlfriends in schools, homes, where a lot of, I hear a lot of the orphans says that, not a lot, a few of the orphans says they were never allowed in the homes of their friends.
You were welcomed.
I was welcome. And then if I missed dinner at the orphan, at the village, I don't think there was a head count or anything because my girlfriend would take me with her girlfriends and we would all eat in their dining room. They never took a head count because I got away with that so many times. I was too far to run and in time for the dinner, or yeah, it's usually dinner. And I used to visit my friends at their mess halls, and they never ate with their families. They always ate with their girlfriends. See, they didn't have family gatherings anymore.
Beginning in 1993, Professor Art Hansen and his colleagues at California State University, Fullerton, began oral interviews of orphans and staff from the Children's Village at Manzanar. They had the largest number of such interviews. These interviews were edited and put in a book, Twice Orphan, Voices from the Children's Village of Manzanar, by Professor Catherine Irwin of the University of Laverne. The 18 interviews are arranged into 8 topical chapters, each with a most informative introduction by Professor Irwin. This is the definitive book on the subject of the Children's Village. Densho has 5 oral interviews which are readily accessible. The 2 oral interviews in this video are from Densho. Almost every year, Manzanar National Historic Site has what is called, quote, public archaeology. The public is invited to come to Manzanar and use a trowel or shovel to dig into the past. The leader is Jeff Burton, Manzanar's manager of cultural resources. The photos were taken last year when the volunteers excavated at the site of the Children's Village. This year, the excavation at Children's Village had to be canceled because of COVID-19. When the COVID-19 social distance is lifted, the archaeological dig at the Children's Village will most likely resume. This will be a great way to learn more about the Children's Village. On June 23, 1942, 2 buses left the Shonyan for Manzanar. It was a 220-mile ride which would take 4 or 5 hours depending on the rest stop. It was probably the longest bus ride for any of the orphans. Sitting in the front was a young white soldier with a rifle and a fixed bayonet, whose job was to watch the orphans. In order to occupy the orphans on this long trip, Lillian had the children sing. One 4-year-old girl came up to the front of the bus to sing. The 4-year-old girl started singing, "God Bless America." Then the young white soldier put his head down and started crying.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains